Hi, I'm David Domke. I'm chair of the Communication Department at the University of Washington. Every once in a while, I get a chance to talk to an alum or a student or a faculty or staff person who's doing something really cool, exciting, or has just had a great deal of impact in the community or in some area of their life. I have privileged here today to talk with a person who's going into our Alumni Hall of Fame, Pamela L. She's the CEO of the Urban League Metropolitan Seattle, and so thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me, David.
Absolutely. So let's go back to you coming to the University of Washington, right? So you were living in Portland, I believe you've told me,
Yes.
and you came to the University of Washington. So why'd you come here, and then why did you major in communication?
So I came here, I'm actually a first-generation college graduate, and when I applied to go to college, I actually was accepted to Yale, but my father was a single dad, and he had a major heart attack when I was in high school, and I thought if I went all the way to Yale and he got sick and I couldn't get home, I would feel horrible. And so I actually applied to the University of Washington because my former boss was a UW alum, and he goes, you need to be a Husky. And so he actually helped me get a late admission into the school, and I came in up in September of 1977. I majored in communications because I was actually the first female sports editor of a high school newspaper in Portland, Oregon. I fell in love with journalism at a very young age, and so I wrote for our high school papers, the Jeffersonian. I went to Thomas Jefferson High School in Portland, and then I had a sports column called Bank Shot.
Nice.
And I was the first female writer. So I'm aging myself when I tell people this. So that was back in '77, and so journalism, the ability to use the word to describe and have impact really hit me at a young age, and so that's why I majored in communications.
What was your first job out of college?
My first job out of college, believe it or not, I worked in the Social Security Administration. They had a program to help first-generation high school kids go to college, and so that was my first job. And then I kind of graduated and I bummed around, and I actually worked at the Pike Place Market in the jewelry field, which is a little hobby of mine. And then I got very, very serious, and it started to get cold, and that was before the market was covered. And I said, I got to find an inside job, and I applied to the city of Seattle, and I started my career there.
Yeah, you've worked for the City of Seattle in some capacity, or you did work for the City of Seattle in some capacity for a number of years, right?
I did.
Yeah, and I know I looked at some of the kind of work you've done, and so what was one or two of the positions along the way? Because you had a number of different ones. One or two positions along the way that you say, yeah, I'm really particularly proud of the work that occurred there.
I could give you two incidences. Probably my first job, I was a community organizer, and it was around, it was in a new department, it was Department of Housing and Human Services, and they started a conservation program, and it was really to teach people about conserving energy, because this was back in the 80s, right, in oil crisis, and we were trying to conserve electricity. And we did a lot of outreach in low-income communities, and there was an influx of Southeast Asians at the time because of the Vietnam War, and so we were the very first program that was able to get materials translated into various languages and use interpreters to help get people involved in these programs. And so I was very proud of that work that happened back in the 80s and the 90s. And we also, translated materials not just in the Southeast Asian languages, but we also did Korean, and we did Spanish and Chinese, because we have a large Asian population and Chinese here. And so that work I was very proud of, because it was to get mainstream society to say, look, we're the melting pot of America. We have this big, pan-Asian population here, and we need to be able to do effective outreach to them, right? And so community organizing got really in my blood as a student at the UW when we were doing protests around affirmative action, but then again in my career at the city. And then my second favorite job, I actually had three. I loved the work I did in neighborhoods, and that was because we were doing a lot of work with connecting with communities and in communities that were historically underrepresented or not included in the government system. And then towards the end of my career, I worked for Mayor Nichols as his outreach director, so as community outreach director. And again, we did some really great work started the Race and Social Justice Initiative for the city, as well as we did a lot of work with youth violence prevention. And so being able to really have an impact on your community in that way in city government was pretty amazing work for me.
How did communication play a role in that body of work? I'm could you just kind of make it concrete to us for our students a little bit?
I think it really helped my ability to be able to move into different arenas of being able to talk to people. So business people, and then my ability to be able to be in the streets and do community-based outreach. I think the ability to write concisely, get on camera, because we did a lot, I was a broadcast journalism major, so I did a lot of TV. And we did debates, and that helped you formulate, when you're trying to get people to understand your point of view. And so I think that all of those skills really helped propel me in my career with the city. And then I also minored in marketing and advertising, and I use those skills today in my job as the CEO of the Urban League, but I also use them as we were marketing and doing outreach in city programs. And so, we would go out and we'd do TV buy ads and newspaper ads, because this is way before the internet, so we had to be very creative. And then we were, in the street. We did a lot of flyers, we did a lot of just one-on-one conversations. So I think just the ability to articulate, listen, be a good listener, get your point across with body language. I talk with my hands a lot, and all of those things come into play as a communications major.
Sure. Okay. And when you started the Race and Social Justice Initiative, how did you? I can't imagine that happened one day. It took probably a long time to kind of get something like that. So, we are so used to a short attention span today that if things don't happen right now, we feel like we move on to something new, right?
Right.
But community organizing actually takes long time to get things done. And when you're talking about government as well in that space, it can be challenging. So what was a lesson or two that kind of in that space of when you're trying to bring about change that you kind of derived from that era?
I think really it's about relationships. It's about building relationships, because when you have a relationship with someone, then you can build trust. And I think what the city was trying to do, the Mayor Nichols stepped out there. He said, we have an issue and we need to address it, and I may not be the one to do it, so I got to bring in experts. And so the ability to admit you know what you know and you know what you don't, and you seek help. And I always say that to people when I go out and I do speeches or I talk to young people. I'm like, one of the things that I've learned is I know what I don't, and I'm not afraid to surround myself with people that know more than me, because that's how we learn. And I try and learn something every day or at least once a week. And so building that initiative was really trying to get buy-in of the city staff, because we did this initiative in-house first before we took it out to the community. And so it was a lot of training, and it was really telling the city departments from the top down, department directors, deputies, managers, staff, we're all going to do this together. And so there was a series of trainings that went on, and now when you get hired in the city of Seattle, within a year you have to take race and social justice training. So now it's a part of fabric of being a city employee. And so that's how you get the buy-in. But it's still in the works. Like we didn't solve it. We started this in 2006, and now here we are, 2016, and the mayor continually talks about the disparities that's happening in our communities, but trying to work together, because it's going to take all of us to solve these long-standing issues, and it's definitely not going to happen overnight.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that work. So with the Urban League, when what led you to take this job?
So after spending 30 years in city government, working under 5 different mayors, I was ready for a change, and I've always wanted to teach. I've done all my volunteer work in the community around youth and kids and teenagers and young people. And I actually was going to apply to grad school and get my teaching certificate and go teach. But the Urban League job opened up, and I'm an Urban Leaguer from way past. My grandmother was the president of the Urban League Guild when I was growing up in Portland, Oregon, and the Guild is an auxiliary arm, a fundraising arm of the League. And when I saw that the League was in trouble, and in my capacity working with Mayor Nichols, we had worked with the Urban League around the Youth Violence Prevention Initiative. So I knew the former CEO, and I was like, this is a really important institution, and what's going on in our city, I knew that institution was too important to fail. So I literally read the job description, saw at the end that they were going to do a nationwide search, and I thought, boy, as cliquish as our city is, if someone came from the outside, it'd be really hard to, save that organization. So let me just put my name in there, just so they can say they had someone that was qualified or kind of qualified. And lo and behold, here I sit 4 years later, I got the job.
Yeah. What was the biggest challenge for you when you said yes for that job?
It was the finances. It was in really poor financial shape, and the reputation had really went to an all-time low. There was some bad press, and there were some allegations that were unfounded. And so it was really, I spent the first year really doing an apology tour. I told everybody, you know, I went in there, we did like a forensic audit, we made sure there wasn't any fraud, and it was really about changing the mindset of people about what the Urban League was there, why it was there, the good work they had done. You know, they stumbled. It was the perfect storm when the financial collapse happened. It really happened across the country and with this organization. And so that was the biggest challenge with the finances. But, you know, I took over in June of 2012. We had a budget under $400,000, and today we have a budget of $2.6 million. So, you know, it couldn't have done it without, again, relationships. I give all credit to relationships with having a stellar staff and having 21 board members now. I had a temporary board of 3 when I took over, but 21 board members from community, from corporate sector, nonprofit, and private to help bring the organization back. Can't do it alone. And again, it was one of those things. I knew a certain amount, but there were some areas where I didn't know, and I sought that help via volunteers or consultants to help turn the organization around.
That sounds like a leadership challenge, and you've excelled in it. And we think in communication here, we think that leadership, that communication is kind of the leadership attribute of the 21st century, that you've got to be able to communicate with people, to bring them together. You have to listen. You have to be able to articulate messages. So how, to kind of as we begin to close this conversation, how central is communication to the work that you're doing now in the Urban League and the Urban League's mission generally?
I think it is paramount. I mean, we could not do the work we do if we did not have great communication skills and the power to articulate our mission, our goals, our values to people in, you know, C-suite, senior leadership, CEOs, senior VPs, when we're out fundraising, to all the way to the ground level and the clients that we serve in these low-income communities of color, long-term disenfranchised communities, immigrant and refugees. We need to be able to cover that spectrum in speech and listening and be empathetic and really, again, build those relationships. And you can do it the best with your mouth, with this tool we have, with these ears and with sight, right? So I truly believe that, and I think that the skills that I gained as a communication major, as I thought back about my career when you first called me and said, hey, we're gonna, you've been nominated and you're gonna go into this Hall of Fame, and I thought, boy, what a great opportunity to be a student at the University of Washington and to build great relationships with people here that I still have today, and to be an alumni of a top 10, you know, school in the country. That brings a lot of credibility. So when you're out telling your story or you're giving someone your resume and they see that you graduated from the University of Washington, that holds a lot of weight. And so to be able to, again, use your communication skills to let people know how proud I am to be a University of Washington Husky. I bleed purple.
You're wearing
I tell
purple,
people I'm
I
wearing
know.
purple today. And it's been a phenomenal opportunity. And I know that this degree that I hold is the reason that I had a stellar 30-year career in the city of Seattle, and the reason that I am the president and CEO of the Urban League today is because of my degree and my education.
Wow, thank you, Pamela. That's as resounding of endorsement as I can hear. That's terrific. Thanks.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I'm David Domke. I'm the chair of the Department of Communication at the University of Washington. This was a chat with the chair with our Hall of Fame 2016 alumni inductee, Pamela L. Thanks for joining.